Hello? Good evening, everyone. Welcome. Oh, let me just adjust that. Okay. Good evening or morning. Hello, Harmony. Hello, Eru, Nedra, Dumpling, Horns, Frogget. Hello. How's everyone today? Good morning. Hello, Aurelia. How are you? I hope you're doing well. Pre-warning, Peppa is in my room. So, it's very likely that I'm going to have to take her out of the room at some point. You ready to snooze? I'm ready to snooze too, but I'm kind of invested in making progress through this book. How's our queen feeling on this beautiful day of being an icon? It's giving slay, but like a little tired, but still slay, you know? I'm glad you're doing well, Aurelia. Hello, Miles. Miles, I saw your suggestion in the suggestion channel. I have played Elden Ring on stream a couple times, but I haven't made it very far. I play with Tatsu, so I'm probably gonna have to ask him if he's free next week to carry me, basically. So yeah, no, it's been a while, so I'm probably I've forgotten everything about Elden Ring, so it's gonna be fun relearning everything. Cozy, tired, but girl boss, true. All slay is good slay, true. Did friend read any of the frog story? I saw it, but it was really late when you posted it, so I haven't had a chance yet, but I will. It's the weekend soon, so I'll have a lot more free time to read it. Hang on, you guys are massive on the screen. Let me resize you a little. There we go. Yeah, I'm excited to read it though, Frogget. And watch for sure. It's mostly me screaming, just letting you know. Me being like, how come it's not hitting? Why is his hitbox so bad? And I'm completely missing, so it's I'm just gaslighting chat, being like, guys, it's not me. The hitbox is really small. Come on, ping difference. I'd be like, guys, I didn't make that dodge because ping diff. Haunting of Hill House again. You've been haunting? You've been watching? Oh, reading. I see. Well, Gamba, have you seen the Netflix show? Actual ping diff? Unlucky. The thing is, Tatsu and I are both in Australia, so it's there shouldn't be a ping diff, but I don't know. Frog can't meow? That's okay. I can't croak. I was trying to do the frog noises in the last story and it was really bad. Hello, Cora. Welcome. Tatsu? Yeah, Majin Tatsu. I prefer the book. Ooh. I haven't read the book, but if you recommend it, I'll put it on my list. I'm trying to build up my book library again 2023. Your girl's gonna be reading again. Insane. But that's one of my New Year's resolutions. You know a Tatsu? I don't know if it's the same Tatsu. Oh, if you guys hear like little tippy tappies, that's Pepper. They are Frog's brother. Oh, I see. I see. Fair enough. Oh my gosh, you guys, you're getting Pepper snoring ASMR. You can hear her, can you? She's snoozing. We gotta be quiet. Soft boy of flies, thank you for the follow. Welcome in. Some other day when I was asleep. Hello, hello. Welcome in. How are you today? Thank you. Hello, Nicola. Welcome in. Fair warning is Pepper does bark quite a bit if she's like startled, so if you hear me suddenly mute, it's because I'm trying to protect all the sleepy and cozy vibes. And Pepper's probably like started barking. I like to preface all my ASMR streams with that. Tin Seller, thank you so much for the follow. Welcome in. How are you, Nico? Hello, Shadows. How are you? Let me see. Where were we up to? Of course, soft boy, that's fine. Welcome, welcome. Dinner soon. What's for dinner? I had chicken palmy today. Trying to figure out where we left off. Oh, we just started Soft Boy, so I'm just looking for where we left off yesterday. Fish with rice. Ooh. I hope you enjoy. Okay, I think I found it. Yeah, perfect time. Oh, Kami. Hello, Kami. Welcome, Raiders. Hello, hello. Thank you for the shout out to Kami. Hello, and Ayumi. Thank you so much for the follow. Welcome in. Kami, how was your stream? Hang on, let me do this. Ooh, okay. You were just chatting? Everyone, please, if you haven't already, please go follow Kami. Kami's a good friend of mine. How was just chatting, baby? You came in at the perfect time. We were just about to get started on another story. Video editing. I can't speak today, apparently. Ah, I see. You're editing Lolly's clips. I see. Oh, Harmony. Gumba. Ayumi, welcome in. Thank you for the follow. Yeah, my brain is like half turned off already, so it's like you know, it is what it is. But yes, for those who don't know, I am Mina. I am an Australian streamer and VTuber. I stream variety content, including gaming, voice work, ASMR, and a bunch of other fun stuff. Today we're reading. We're reading some fairy tales by Hans Christian. What's his last name? Hans Christian Andersen and blah blah Andersen. I really can't speak today. I do voice work. I'm still in the process of learning, but we're getting there. Thank you. Hello. Oh, it's a Kazu. Hello, Kazu. Okay, thank you so much again, Skami, for the ride. Oh my gosh, what is this? I keep getting distracted. I'm gonna close this. But yes, thank you for the raid. You stealing Kami? Wow. Please teach me how to speak. You're looking at the wrong cat right now. Love you, Kami. Thank you again. Have fun, Kazu. Zarak, hello. Thank you, thank you. If you can hear voices in the background, no, you can't. I'm doing well. Thank you, Sarah. How are you? I think the lurk has a very short cooldown. You, Miss Bozo, thank you so much for the follow. Welcome in. Exactly, Dumplin. Exactly. Oh, the heat is so bad. Oh my gosh. Okay, give me 2 seconds. I'm gonna go. Silence. Some people really quick. There you go. Alright. When I come back, we'll get started, okay? Give me 1 moment, chat. Okay. We are back. Ominous? Never. I don't know what you're talking about. I would never. No. I would never be violent or ruthless. Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Okay. So, once again, our book is a collection of fairy tales by the author Hans Christian Andersen. We read about 5 stories yesterday, also, and There are 168 stories in this book. I'm gonna go silence some people. Well, you know. Either way, it does the job. Okay, so if you're here, please sit back, relax. Make sure you have a drink, you have some snacks, or you're all tucked in, nice and warm, or at least comfy. This story is called The Traveling Companion. Okay. Poor John was in great tribulation, for his father was very ill and could not get well again. Except these two, there was no one at all in the little room. The lamp on the table was nearly extinguished, and it was quite late in the evening. Is this girl about to bark? You have been a good son, John, said the sick father. Providence will help you through the world. And he looked at him with mild, earnest eyes, drew a deep breath, and died. It was just as if he had slept. But John wept, for now he had no one in the world, neither father nor mother, neither sister nor brother. Poor John. He knelt down beside the bed, kissed his dead father's hand, and shed very many salt tears. But at last his eyes closed, and he went to sleep, lying his head against the hard bedboard. Then he dreamed a strange dream. He saw the sun and moon curtsy to him, and he beheld his father again, fresh and well, and he heard his father laugh as he had always laughed when he was very glad. A beautiful girl, with a golden crown upon her long beautiful hair, gave him her hand, and his father said, "Do you see what a bride you have gained? She is the most beautiful in the whole world." Then he awoke, and all the splendor was gone. His father was lying dead and cold in the bed, and there was no one at all with them. Poor John. In the next week the dead man was buried. The son walked close behind the coffin, and could now no longer see the good father who had loved him so much. He heard how they threw the earth down upon the coffin, and stopped to see the last corner of it. The next shovelful of earth hid even that. Then he felt just as if his heart would burst into pieces. So sorrowful was he. The sun shone magnificently on the green trees, just as if it would have said, "You shall no longer be sorrowful, John. Do you see how beautifully blue the sky is? Your father is up there, and prays to the Father of all that it may be always be well with you." "I will always be good," said John. "Then I shall go to heaven to my father, and what joy that will be when we see each other again. How much I shall then have to tell him, and he will show me so many things, and explain to me so much of the glories of heaven, just as he taught me here on earth. Oh, how joyful that will be. He pictured that to himself so plainly that he smiled, while the tears were still rolling down his cheek. The little birds sat up in the chestnut trees and twittered, "Tweet, tweet." They were joyful and merry, though they had been at the burying, but they knew quite well that the dead man was now in heaven, that he had wings far larger and more beautiful than theirs, that he was now happy because he had been a good man upon earth, and they were glad at it. John saw how they flew from the green trees out into the world, and he felt inclined to fly too. But first, he cut out a great cross of wood to put on his father's grave, and when he brought it there in the evening, the grave was decked with sand and flowers. Strangers had done this, for they were all very fond of the good father who was now dead. Early next morning, John packed his little bundle and put in his belt his whole inheritance, which consisted of $50 and a few silver shillings. With this, he intended to wander out into the world. But first, he went to the churchyard, to his father's grave, repeated the Lord's Prayer, and said, "Farewell, dear Father. I will always be good, and so you may well venture to pray to the good God that things may go well with me." Out in the field where he was walking, all the flowers stood fresh and beautiful in the warm sunshine, and they nodded in the wind, just as if they would have said, "Welcome to the greenwood. Is it not fine here?" But John turned back once more to look at the old church in which he had been christened when he was a little child, and where he had been every Sunday with his father at the service, and had sung his psalm. Then, high up in one of the openings of the tower, he saw the church goblin standing in his little pointed red cap, shading his face with his bent arm to keep the sun from shining in his eyes. John nodded a farewell to him, and the little goblin waved his red cap, laid his hand on his heart, and kissed his hand to John a great many times. Mikazuki Yozora, thank you so much for the follow. Welcome in. How are you? Please, feel free to get cozy. Okay. He kissed his hand to John a great many times to show that he wished the traveler well and hoped he would have a prosperous journey. I'm not quite sure what they mean about church goblin. It's very interesting. I've never heard of that before. John thought what a number of fine things he would get to see in the great, splendid world. And he went on farther than he had ever been before. He did not know the places at all through which he came, nor the people whom he met. Now he was far away in a strange region. The first night he was obliged to lie under a haystack in the field to sleep, for he had no other bed. But that was very nice, he thought. The king could not be better off. There was the whole field, with the brook, the haystack, and the blue sky above it. That was certainly a beautiful sleeping room. The green grass with little red and white flowers was the carpet. The elder bushes and the wild rose hedges were garlands of flowers. And for a wash-hand basin, he had the whole brook with the clear fresh water, where the sedges bowed before him and wished him good evening and good morning. The moon was certainly a great night lamp, high up under the blue ceiling, and that lamp would never set fire to the curtains with its light. Thank you, Hans. Take care, take care. I hope your day is wonderful. John could sleep quite quietly, and he did so, and never woke until the sun rose and all the little birds were singing around. Good morning, good morning. Are you not up yet? The bells were ringing for church. It was Sunday. The people went to hear the preacher, and John followed them and sang a psalm and heard God's word. It seemed to him just as if he was in his own church, where he had been christened and had sung psalms with his father. Out in the churchyard were many graves, and on some of them the grass grew high. Then he thought of his father's grave, which would at last look like these, as he could not weed it and adorn it. So he sat down and plucked up the long grass, set up the wooden crosses which had fallen down, and put back in their places the wreaths which the wind had blown away from the graves. For he thought, perhaps someone will do the same to my father's grave, as I cannot do it. Outside the churchyard stood an old beggar, leaning upon his crutch. John gave him the silver shillings which he had, and then went away, happy and cheerful, into the wide world. Towards evening the weather became terribly bad. He made haste to get under shelter, but dark night soon came on. Then at last he came to a little church, which lay quite solitary on a small hill. The door luckily stood ajar, and he crept in. Here he decided to remain till the storm had gone down. Here I will sit down in a corner, said he. I am quite tired and require a little rest. It sounds like me when I get home. Then he sat down, folded his hands, and said his evening prayer. And before he was aware of it, he was asleep and dreaming, while it thundered and lightened outside. When he woke, it was midnight, but the bad weather had passed by, and the moon shone upon him through the windows. In the midst of the church stood an open coffin with a dead man in it, who had not yet been buried. John was not at all timid, for he had a good conscience, and he knew very well that the dead do not harm anyone. It is living people who do harm. Two such living bad men stood close by the dead man, who had been placed here in the church till he should be buried. They had an evil design upon him, and would not let him rest quietly in his coffin, but we're going to throw him out before the church door. The poor dead man. Why will you do that? Asked John. That is wrong and wicked. Let him rest for mercy's sake. Nonsense, replied the bad man. He has cheated us. He owed us money and could not pay it. And now he's dead into the bargain, and we shall not get a penny. So we mean to revenge ourselves properly. He shall lie like a dog outside the church door. I have not more than $50, cried John. That is my whole inheritance, but I will gladly give it to you if you honestly promise me to leave the poor dead man in peace. I shall manage to get on without the money. I have hearty, strong limbs, and heaven will always help me. Yes, said these ugly bad men. If you will pay his debt, we will do nothing to him. You may depend upon that. And then they took the money he gave them, laughed aloud at his good nature, and went their way. But he had laid the corpse out again in the coffin, and folded its hands, took leave of it, and went away contentedly through the great forest. All around, wherever the moon could shine through between the trees, he saw the graceful little elves playing merrily. Welcome, Kara. How are you doing? They did not let him disturb them. They knew that he was a good, innocent lad, and it is only the bad people who can never see the elves. Some of them were not larger than a finger, and had fastened up their long yellow hair with golden combs. They were rocking themselves 2 and 2 on the great dewdrops that lay on the leaves and on the high grass. Sometimes the drop rolled away, and then they fell down between the long grass stalks, and that occasioned much laughter and noise among the little creatures. It was extremely amusing. No worries, Kara. Get comfy. They sang, and John recognized quite plainly the pretty songs which he had learned as a little boy. Great colored spiders with silver crowns on their heads had to spin long hanging bridges and palaces from hedge to hedge, and as the tiny dewdrops fell on these, they looked like gleaming glass in the moonlight. This continued until the sun rose. Then the little elves crept into the flower buds, and the wind caught the bridges and palaces, which flew through the air in a shape of spiders' webs. John had just come out of the wood when a strong man's voice called out behind him, "Hello, comrade! Whither are you journeying?" "Into the wide world," he replied. "I have neither father nor mother, and am but a poor lad, but Providence will help me." "It's just a poor fool. I'm a poor family." "I'm going out into the wide world too," said the strange man. "Shall we two keep one another company?" "Yes, certainly," said John. And so they went on together. Soon they became very fond of each other, for they were both good souls. But John saw that the stranger was much more clever than himself. He had traveled through almost the whole world and could tell of almost everything that existed. A chronic case of little guy disease? Holy shit, I can't speak today. What the fuck? Anyway. The sun already stood high when they seated themselves under a great tree to eat their breakfast. And just then, an old woman came up. I noticed that there's a lot of like big men and old women in these stories, and like random goblins. Like, these are very common recurrences. They got their type. It's true. I'm not judging. I'm just pointing out recurring motifs in these stories. No judgment. And just then, an old woman came up. Oh, she was very old and walked quite bent, leaning upon a crutch. Upon her back she carried a bundle of firewood which she had collected in the forest. Her apron was tucked up, and John saw that 3 great stalks of fern and some willow twigs stuck out of it. When she was close to them, her foot slipped. She fell and gave a loud scream, for she had broken her leg, the poor old woman. John directly proposed that they should carry the old woman home to her dwelling. But the stranger opened his knapsack, took out a little jar, and said that he had a salve there which would immediately make her leg whole and strong, so that she could walk home herself as if she had never broken her leg at all. Hey CL Zyra, thank you so much for the follow. Welcome in. So he has like a miracle cure or something. Okay. But for that, he required that she should give him the 3 rods which she carried in her apron. That would be paying well, said the old woman, and she nodded her head in a strange way. She did not like to give away the rods, but then it was not agreeable to lie there with a broken leg. So she gave him the wands, and as soon as he had only rubbed the ointment on her leg, the old mother rose and walked much better than before. Such was the power of this ointment. But then it was not to be bought at the chemist's. What horrifying fever dream are you reading us today? Well, I'm reading the story of the traveling companion. So far it's pretty normal, I think. I'm so sorry if you guys can hear all the voices in the background. I'm not fond of giving out. Kara? Unholy Salary, thank you so much for the follow. Welcome in. The ointment's OP, it's true. It's true. What do you want with the rods? John asked his traveling companion. Oh my god, they dropped the name of the story. Guys, just give that girl Medmist. Slap some Omni gel on it, you know. Roll credit. They are 3 capital fern brooms, replied he. I like those very much, for I am a whimsical fellow. Hello, Serene. Welcome in. How are you doing? Happy holidays. And then they went on a good way. See how the sky is becoming overcast, said John, pointing straight before them. Those are terribly thick clouds. No, replied his traveling companion. Those are not clouds. They are mountains. The great, glorious mountains on which one gets quite up over the clouds and into the free air. Believe me, it is delicious. Tomorrow we shall certainly be far out into the world. My man has not touched grass his entire life. He did not know what mountains were. Damn. Hi, Nedra. I'm reading The Traveling Companion. But that was not so near as it looked. They had to walk for a whole day before they came to the mountains, where the black woods grew straight up towards heaven, and there were stones almost as big as a whole town. It might certainly be hard work to get quite across them, and for that reason John and his comrade went into the inn to rest themselves well and gather strength for the morrow's journey. Down in the great common room at the inn, many guests were assembled, for a man was there exhibiting a puppet show. He had just put up his little theatre, and the people were sitting round to see the play. Quite in front, a fat old butcher had taken his seat in the very best place. His great bulldog, who looked very much inclined to bite, sat at his side and made big eyes, as all the rest were doing. Now the play began, and it was a very nice play, with a king and a queen in it. They sat upon a velvet throne, and had gold crowns on their heads and long trains to their cloaks, for their means admitted of that. The prettiest of wooden dolls with glass eyes and great moustaches sat at all the doors and opened and shut them so that fresh air might come into the room. It was a very pleasant play, and not at all mournful. But goodness knows what the big bulldog could have been thinking of. Just as the queen stood up and was walking across the whole boards, as the fat butcher did not hold him, he made a spring upon the stage and seized the queen round her slender waist so that it cracked. It was quite terrible. The poor man who managed the play was very much frightened and quite sorrowful about his queen, for she was the daintiest doll he possessed. And now the ugly bulldog had bitten off her head. But afterwards, when the people went away, the stranger said that he would put her to rights again, and then he brought out his little jar and rubbed the doll with the ointment with which he had cured the old woman when she broke her leg. Emmanuel, thank you so much for the follow. Welcome in. Waste not, want not. As soon as the doll had been rubbed, She was whole again. Yes, she could even move all her limbs by herself. It was no longer necessary to pull her by string. The doll was like a living person, only that she could not speak. The man who had the little puppet show was very glad. Now he had not to hold this doll any more. She could dance by herself, and none of the others could do that. When night came on, and all the people in the inn had gone to bed, there was someone who sighed so fearfully, and went on doing it so long that they all got up to see who this could be. The man who had shown the play went to his little theatre, for it was there that somebody was sighing. All the wooden dolls lay mixed together, and the king and all his followers, and it was they who sighed so pitiably, and stared with their big glass eyes, for they wished to be rubbed a little. As the queen had been, so that they might be able to move by themselves. The queen at once sank on her knees and stretched forth her beautiful crown as if she begged, "Take this from me, but rub my husband and my courtiers." Damn. NTR? In this book? In my fairy tale book? Oh no. Then the poor man, the proprietor of the little theatre, and the doll could not refrain from weeping, for he was really sorry for them. He immediately promised the traveling companion that he would give him all the money he should receive the next evening for the performance if the latter would only anoint 4 or 5 of his dolls. Andres, thank you so much for the follow. Welcome in. But the comrade said he did not require anything at all but the sword the man wore by his side. Andres, thank you for the redeem. Sleepy Oni, thank you so much for the follow. Welcome in. And on receiving this, he anointed 6 of the dolls, who immediately began to dance so gracefully that all the girls, the living human girls, fell a-dancing too. The coachman and the cook danced, the waiter and the chambermaid, and all the strangers, and the fire shovel and tongs. But these latter fell down just as they were made their first leaps. Yes, it was a merry night. Next morning, John went away from them all with his traveling companion, up onto the high mountains, and through the great pine woods. They came so high up that the church steeples under them looked at last like little red berries among all the green. And they could see very far, many, many miles away, where they had never been. So much splendor in the world John had never seen at one time before. And the sun shone warm in the fresh blue air, and among the mountains he could hear the huntsmen blowing their horns so gaily and sweetly that tears came into his eyes, and he could not help calling out, "How kind has heaven been to us all! to give us all the splendor that is in this world. The traveling companion also stood there with folded hands and looked over the forest and the towns in the warm sunshine. At the same time, there arose lovely sounds over their heads. They looked up, and a great white swan was soaring in the sky and singing as they had never heard a bird sing till then. But the song became weaker and weaker. He bowed his head and sank quite lowly down at their feet, where he lay dead. The beautiful bird. Is anyone else noticing that, like, a lot of things get introduced and then suddenly they're dead? Two such splendid wings, said the traveling companion, so white and large as those which this bird has, are worth money. I will take them with me. Do you see that it was good I got a saber? And so, with one blow, he cut off both the wings of the dead swan, for he wanted to keep them. They now travelled for many, many miles over the mountains, till at last they saw a great town before them with hundreds of towers, which glittered like silver in the sun. Give me one moment. Sorry, someone came into my room. Oh. Okay. Wow. Ah. They now travelled for many, many miles over the mountains, till at last they saw a great town before them with hundreds of towers, which glittered like silver in the sun. In the midst of the town was a splendid marble palace, roofed with red gold, and there lived the king. John and the traveling companion would not go into the town at once, but remained in the inn outside the town, that they might dress themselves, for they wished to look nice when they came out into the streets. The host told them that the king was a very good man, who never did harm to anyone. But his daughter, yes, goodness preserve us, she was a bad princess. She possessed beauty enough. No one could be so pretty and so charming as she was. But of what use was that? She was a wicked witch. Oh my gosh! Oh my gosh! Sorry, chat. Give me one moment. I got scared too. Oh, I got scared too. Oh my god, my heart is beating really fast. I'm so sorry, guys. Okay. Hello, welcome in. Thank you for the follow. I will take this time to drink some water. Man, I knew it was gonna happen, but I was like, maybe if she's asleep, she'll be quiet. Apparently not. Okay. We'll catch. Ah, yes, the princess. She was a wicked witch, through whose fault many gallant princes had lost their lives. She sounds like a girl boss. She had given permission to all men to seek her hand. Anyone might come, be he prince or beggar. It was all the same to her. He had only to guess 3 things about which she questioned him. If he could do that, she would marry him, and he was to be king over the whole country where her father should die. But if he could not guess the 3 things, oh God, she caused him to be hanged or to have his head cut off. So evil and so wicked was the beautiful princess. Her father, the old king, was very sorry about it, but he could not forbid her to be so wicked, because he had once said that he would have nothing to do with her lovers. She might do as she liked. Yeah, I don't know, it kind of seems fair. Every time a prince came and was to guess to gain the princess, he was unable to do it and was hanged or lost his head. He had been warned in time, you see, and might have given over his wooing. The old king was so sorry for all this misery and woe that he used to go down on his knees with all his soldiers for a day in every year, praying that the princess might become good. But she would not, by any means. Slay. The old woman who drank brandy used to color it quite black before they drank it. They were in such deep mourning, and they certainly could not do more. The ugly princess, said John. She ought really to have the rod. That would do her good. Jesus. If I were only the old king, she should be punished. Then they heard the people outside shouting, "Hurrah!" The princess came by, and she was really so beautiful that all the people forgot about how wicked she was, and that is why they cried, "Hurrah!" 12 beautiful virgins, all in white silk gowns, and each with a golden tulip in her hand, rode on coal-black steeds at her side. The princess herself had a snow-white horse decked with diamonds and rubies. Her riding habit was all of cloth of gold, and the whip she held in her hand looked like a sunbeam. The golden crown on her head was just like little stars out of the sky, and her mantle was sewn together out of more than 1,000 beautiful butterflies' wings. In spite of this, she herself was much more lovely than all her clothes. When John saw her, his face became as red as a drop of blood, and he could hardly utter a word. The princess looked just like the beautiful lady with the golden crown of whom he had dreamt on the night when his father died. He thought her so enchanting that he could not help loving her greatly. It could not be true that she was a wicked witch who caused people to be hanged or beheaded if they could not guess the riddles she put to them. Everyone has permission to aspire to her hand, even the poorest beggar. I will really go to the castle, for I cannot help doing it. Oh, my man's is whipped. Okay. They all told him not to attempt it, for certainly he would fare as all the rest had done. His traveling companion, too, tried to dissuade him, but John thought it would end well. He brushed his shoes and his coat, washed his face and his hands, combed his beautiful yellow hair, and then went quite alone into the town and to the palace. "Come in," said the old king, when John knocked at the door. John opened it, and the old king came towards him in a dressing gown and embroidered slippers. He had the crown on his head. And a scepter in one hand, while an orb lay in the other. "Wait a little," said he, and he put the orb under his arm so that he could reach out his hand to John. But as soon as he learned that his visitor was a suitor, he began to weep so violently that both the scepter and the orb fell to the ground, and he was obliged to wipe his eyes with his dressing gown. Poor old king! "Give it up," said he. "You will fare badly, as all the others have done. Well, you shall see." Then he led him out into the princess's pleasure garden. There was a terrible sight. In every tree there hung 3 or 4 kings' sons who had wooed the princess, but had not been able to guess the riddle she proposed to them. Each time that the breeze blew, all the skeletons rattled so that even the little birds were frightened and never dared to come into the garden. All the flowers were tied up to human bones, and in the flower pots skulls stood and grinned. That was certainly a garden for a princess. So, she's goth. Is that what we're hearing right now? "Here you see it," said the old king. "It will chance to you as it had chanced to all these whom you see here, therefore you had better give it up. You will really make me unhappy, for I take these things very much to heart." John kissed the good old king's hand and said it would go well, for that he was quite enchanted with the beautiful princess. Then the princess herself came riding into the courtyard with all her ladies, and they went out to her and wished her good morning. She was beautiful to look at, and she gave John her hand, and he cared much more for her than before. She could certainly not be a wicked witch, as the people asserted. Then they betook themselves to the hall, and the little pages waited upon them with preserves and gingerbread. But the old king was quite sorrowful. He could not eat anything at all. Besides, gingerbread was too hard for him. It was settled that John should come to the palace again the next morning. Then the judges and the whole council would be assembled and would hear how he succeeded with his answers. If it went well, he should come twice more, but no one had yet come who had succeeded in guessing right the first time, and so they had to lose their lives. John was not at all anxious as to how he should fare. On the contrary, he was merry, thought only of the beautiful princess, and felt quite certain that he should be helped. But how, he did not know, and preferred not to think of it. He danced along the road returning to the inn, where his traveling companion was waiting for him. John could not leave off telling how polite the princess had been to him and how beautiful she was. He declared he already longed for the next day, when he was to go into the palace and try his luck in guessing. But the traveling companion shook his head and was quite downcast. "I am so fond of you," said he. "We might have been together a long time yet, and now I am to lose you already." "You poor dear John." "I should like to cry, but I will not disturb your merriment on the last evening, perhaps, we shall ever spend together. We will be merry, very merry. Tomorrow, when you are gone, I can weep undisturbed." "Shad! Hello, hello. Welcome in. Thank you for the lurk." All the people in the town had heard directly that a new suitor for the princess had arrived, and there was great sorrow on that account. The theatre remained closed. The women who sold cakes tied bits of crepe around the sugar pigs, and the king and the priests were on their knees in the churches. There was great lamentation, for John would not, they all thought, fare better than the other suitors had. Towards evening, the traveling companion mixed a great bowl of punch and said to John, "Now we will be very merry and drink to the health of the princess." But when John had drunk 2 glasses, he became so sleepy that he found it impossible to keep his eyes open, and he sank into a deep sleep. The traveling companion lifted him very gently from his chair and laid him in his bed, and when it grew to be dark night, he took the 2 great wings which he had cut off the swan and bound them to his own shoulders. Then he put in his pocket the longest of the rods he had received from the old woman who had fallen and broken her leg, and he opened the window and flew away over the town, straight towards the palace, where he seated himself in a corner under the window which looked into the bedroom of the princess. All was quiet in the whole town. Now the clock struck 11:45, and the window was opened, and the princess came out in a long white cloak and with black wings, and flew away across the town to a great mountain. But the traveling companion made himself invisible, so that she could not see him at all, and flew behind her, and whipped the princess with his rod, so that the blood actually came wherever he struck. Oh, that was a voyage through the air. The wind caught her cloak so that it spread out on all sides like a great sail, and the moon shone through it. "How it hails! How it hails!" said the princess at every blow she got from the rod, and it served her right. At last she arrived at the mountain and knocked there. There was a rolling like thunder, and the mountain opened, and the princess went in. The traveling companion followed her, for no one could see him. He was invisible. They went through a great long passage where the walls shone in quite a peculiar way. There were more than 1,000 glowing spiders running up and down the walls and gleaming like fire. Then they came into a great hall built of silver and gold. Flowers as big as sunflowers, red and blue, shone on the walls, but no one could pluck these flowers, for the stems were ugly, poisonous snakes, and the flowers were streams of fire pouring out of their mouths. The whole ceiling was covered with shining glowworms and sky blue bats, flapping their thin wings. It looked quite terrific. In the middle of the floor was a throne, carried by 4 skeleton horses with a harness of fiery red spiders. The throne itself was of milk-white glass, and the cushions were little black mice biting each other's tails. Above it was a canopy of pink spider's web, trimmed with the prettiest little green flies which gleamed like jewels. On the throne sat an old magician, with a crown on his ugly head and a scepter in his hand. He kissed the princess on the forehead, made her sit down beside him on the costly throne, and then the music began. Great black grasshoppers played on harps, and the owl beat her wings upon her body because she hadn't a drum. That was a strange concert. What the heck is going on? Little black goblins with a jack-o'-lantern light on their caps danced about in the hall, but no one could see the traveling companion. He had placed himself just behind the throne and heard and saw everything. The courtiers who now came in were very grand and stately, but he could see it all, knew very well what it all meant. They were nothing more than broomsticks with heads of cabbages on them, which the magician had animated by his power, and whom he had given embroidered clothes. Shade the Bean, thank you so much for the follow. Welcome in. Yeah, I'm like, what's going on, Samsonite? But that did not matter, for you see, they only wanted for show. After there had been a little dancing, the princess told the magician that she had a new suitor, and therefore she inquired of him what she should think of to ask the suitor when he should come tomorrow to the palace. "Listen," said the magician. "I will tell you that. You must choose something very easy, for he won't think of it. Think of one of your shoes. That he will not guess. Let him have his head cut off, but don't forget, when you come to me tomorrow night, to bring me his eyes, or I'll eat them." The princess curtsied very low and said she would not forget the eyes. The magician opened the mountain, and she flew home again, but the traveling companion followed her and beat her again so hard with the rod that she sighed quite deeply about the heavy hailstorm. "Hello, Bob, welcome in," and hurried as much as she could to get back into the bedroom through the window. So she thinks she's being hit by hail. Girl, no problem, Bob. Get comfy. The traveling companion, for his part, flew back to the inn where John was still asleep, took off his wings, and then lay down upon the bed, for he might well be tired. It was quite early in the morning when John awoke. The traveling companion also got up and said he had a wonderful dream in the night about the princess and her shoe, and he therefore begged John to ask if the princess had not thought about her shoe, for it was this he had heard from the magician in the mountain. But he would not tell John anything about that. He merely told him to ask if she had not thought about one of her shoes. "I may just as well ask about that as about anything else," said John. "Perhaps it is quite right what you have dreamed, but I will bid you farewell, for, if I guess wrong, I shall never see you again." "Thank you so much, Shay. That's so kind of you to say. I'm glad you like my model." Then they embraced each other, and John went into the town and to the palace. The entire hall was filled with people. The judges sat in the armchairs and had eider-down pillows behind their heads, for they had a great deal to think about. The old king stood up and wiped his eyes with a white pocket handkerchief. Now the princess came in. She was much more beautiful than yesterday, and bowed to all in a very affable manner. But to John she gave her hand and said, "Good morning to you." Now John was to guess what she had thought of. Oh, how lovingly she looked at him. But as soon as she heard the single word "shoe" pronounced, she became as white as chalk in the face and trembled all over. But that availed her nothing, for John had guessed right. Wonderful! How glad the old king was! He threw a somersault beautiful to behold, and all the people clapped their hands in honor of him and of John, who had guessed right the first time. The traveling companion beamed with delight when he heard that how well the matters had gone. But John folded his hands and thanked God, who certainly would help him also the second and third time. The next day he was to guess again. The evening passed just like that of yesterday. While John slept, the traveling companion flew behind the princess out to the mountain and beat her even harder than the time before, for now he had taken 2 rods. No one saw him, and he heard everything. Good night, Dumpling. The princess was to think of her glove, and this again he told John as if it had been a dream. Thus John could guess correctly, which caused great rejoicing in the palace. The whole court threw somersaults, just as they had seen the king do the first time, but the princess lay on the sofa and would not say a single word. Now, the question was if John could guess properly the third time. If he succeeded, he was to have the beautiful princess and inherit the whole kingdom after the old king's death. If he failed, he was to lose his life, and the magician would eat his beautiful blue eyes. That evening, John went early to bed, said his prayers, and went to sleep quite quietly. But the traveling companion bound his wings to his back and his sword by his side, and took all 3 rods with him, and so flew away to the palace. It was a very dark night. The wind blew so hard that the tiles flew off from the roofs, and the trees in the garden where the skeletons hung bent like reeds before the storm. The lightning flashed out every minute, and the thunder rolled just as if it was one peal, lasting the whole night. Now, the window opened, and the princess flew out. She was as pale as death, but she laughed at the bad weather and thought it was not bad enough yet. And her white cloak fluttered in the wind like a great sail, but the traveling companion beat her with the 3 rods so that the blood dripped upon the ground, and at last she could scarcely fly any farther. At length, however, she arrived at the mountain. "It hails and blows dreadfully," she said. "I have never been out in such weather." "One may have too much of a good thing," said the magician. Now, she told him that John had also guessed correctly the second time. Right, Samson? It's so funny to imagine. If he did the same on the morrow, then he had won, and she could never come to him in the mountain any more, and would never be able to perform such feats of magic as before, and so she was quite dejected. "He shall not be able to guess," said the magician. "I shall think of something of which he has never thought, or he must be greater a conjurer than I. But now we will be merry." And he took the princess by the hands, and they danced about with all the little goblins and jack-o'-lanterns that were in the room. The red spiders jumped just as merrily up and down the walls. It looked as if fiery flowers were spurting out. The owl played the drum, the crickets piped, and the black grasshoppers played on the harp. It was a merry ball. When they had danced long enough, the princess was obliged to go home, for she might be missed in the palace. The magician said he would accompany her, then they would have each other's company on the way. Then they flew away into the bad weather, and the traveling companion broke his 3 rods across the backs. Never had the magician been out in such a hailstorm. In front of the palace, he said goodbye to the princess and whispered to her at the same time, "Think of my head." But the traveling companion heard it, and just at the moment when the princess slipped through the window into her bedroom, and the magician was about to turn back, He seized him by his long beard and with his saber cut off the ugly conjurer's head just by the shoulders, so that the magician did not even see him. The body he threw out into the sea to the fishes, but the head he only dipped into the water, and then tied it in his silk handkerchief, took it with him into the inn, and then lay down to sleep. Jeez. The next morning he gave John the handkerchief and told him not to untie it until the princess asked him to tell her her thoughts. He really likes John. I did not see that coming. Did you guys see that coming? There were so many people in the great hall of the palace that they stood as close together as radishes bound together in a bundle. The council sat in the chairs with the soft pillows, and the old king had new clothes on. The golden crown and scepter had been polished, and everything looked quite stately. But the princess was very pale, and had a coal black dress on, as if she were going to a funeral. "Oh, of what have I thought?" she asked John. And he immediately untied the handkerchief, and was himself quite frightened when he saw the ugly magician's head. All present shuddered, for it was terrible to look upon. But the princess sat just like a statue, and could not utter a single word. At length she stood up and gave John her hand, for he had guessed correctly. She did not look at anyone, only sighed aloud and said, "Now you are my lord. This evening we will hold our wedding." "I like that," cried the old king, "so I would have it." All present cried, "Hurrah!" The soldiers' band played music in the streets, the bells rang, and the cake women took off the black crape from the sugar pigs, for now joy reigned everywhere. 3 oxen roasted whole, and stuffed with ducks and fowls, were placed in the middle of the market, that everyone might cut himself a slice. The fountains ran with the best wine, and whoever bought a penny cake at a baker's got 6 buns into the bargain, and the buns had raisins in them. Women love severed heads? True. Take note. Ayo, that slice of cake with like extra 6 buns for free, that's like bussin'. That's kind of really good. In the evening, the whole town was illuminated. The soldiers fired off the cannon, and the boys let off crackers, and there was eating and drinking, clinking of glasses, and dancing in the palace. All the noble gentlemen and pretty ladies danced with each other, and one could hear a long distance off how they sang. "Here are many pretty girls who all love to dance. See, they whirl like spinning wheels. Retire and advance. Turn, my pretty maiden, do till the sole falls from your shoe." But still the princess was a witch, and did not like John. This had been expected by the traveling companion, and so he gave John 3 feathers out of the swan's wings, and a little bottle with a few drops in it. And he told John that he must put a large tub of water before the princess's bed, and when the princess was about to get into bed, he should give her a little push so that she should fall into the tub, and then he must dip her 3 times. After he had put the feathers and poured in the drops, she would then lose her magic qualities and love him very much. Huh? Twisted, hello, welcome in. So let me get this straight. He wants him to push the princess into a tub and then dunk her in it 3 times and then pour the bottle and put the swan feathers in, and she'll lose her magic and she will love him. John did all that the traveling companion had advised him to do. Oh my god. The princess screamed loudly while he dipped her in the tub and struggled under his hands in the form of a great coal-black swan with fiery eyes. When she came up the second time above the water, the swan was white, with the exception of a black ring around her neck. John let the water close for the 3rd time over the bird, and in the same moment it was changed again to the beautiful princess. She was more beautiful even than before, and thanked him with tears in her eyes that she had been freed from the magic spell. Oh, okay. The next morning the old king came with his whole court, and then there was great congratulation till late into the day. Last of all came the traveling companion. He had his staff in his hand and his knapsack on his back. John kissed him many times and said he must not depart. He must remain with a friend of whose happiness he was the cause. But the traveling companion shook his head and said mildly and kindly, Now my time is up. I have only paid my debt. Do you remember the dead man whom the bad people wished to injure? You gave all that you possessed in order that he might rest in the grave. I am that man. And in the same moment, he vanished. The wedding festivities lasted a whole month. John and the princess loved each other truly, and the old king passed many pleasant days and let their little children ride on his knees and play with his scepter. And John afterwards became king over the whole country. Such was the power of good deeds and a good heart. The end. ResChris770, thank you so much for the follow. Welcome in. How are you? Oh wow, that was a long one. Don't play with Grandpa's scepter. Why not? What's wrong with it? Who is in? Welcome. You love fairy tales? Yes, we're reading Fairy Tales by Hans Christian Andersen. I hope you're all well. That was a really long one. I think it was something like 20 pages. It all worked out in the end, which is surprising. True. Oh, how many? Share it if you like. In like Discord or wherever you want. Oh, that was like a 20-page story. Oh my god. It was kind of like, it was quite a wild ride. A lot happened. I don't even know where to like begin to unpack it. But I think you guys are going to like the next one because it is a classic. I kept waiting for the companion to like steal his soul. I was like, who is this guy? They kept making religious references, so I was like, is it Jesus? Like, but I guess it was just the soul of the dude. He was really kind too. This next story is the original Little Mermaid, also known as the Little Sea Maid. Oh, I see. Well, welcome in. Get comfy and sit back, relax. Jesus turns into a swan and beats flying. I mean, she deserved it. Harmony! It looks so good! Oh my god, that's gorgeous! Oh, I love the background, the lighting, expression, the pose. Oh, it's so good. Love it. Everything is so lovely about it. That's sick. So excited to see more of your model. But yes, thank you, Raz. I'm glad that you stopped by. Get comfy and hopefully you'll be able to sleep soon. I just found a sticky note in this book because I think I might have used this to like do an assessment or something in high school, because I found like a sticky note with a bunch of notes about a particular English module, I guess I did. What a throwback. The Little Sea Maid and the Price of Challenging Superior Forces. Jeez. So for those who don't know, things in this book, while are familiar, might be a lot darker than what, say, Disney has popularized. These are the original stories, and a lot of it probably doesn't make sense straight away, but in essence, it's really the raw material from which all the appropriations have been based off. And it has its own charm. No Sebastian? Unfortunately, no. Yuki, thank you for the hydrate. How are you, Yuki? so hot. Water is so good. Making breakfast? What are you making? I hope it's yummy. Okay, here we go. Before we start, you should take this opportunity to get water or go to the bathroom if you haven't and you have to. Stretch. Please stretch. This is the story of the little sea maid. Yum. Grilled cheese banger. Good morning, Thick. I hope your morning is starting well and that you slept well. Welcome in. Okay. No, she's not called grilled cheese. Yes. Far out in the sea, the water is as blue as the petals of the most beautiful cornflower, and as clear as the purest glass. But it is very deep, deeper than any cable will sound. Many steeples must be placed one above the other to reach from the bottom to the surface of the water. And down there live the sea people. Now, you must not believe there is nothing down there but the best sand. No, the strangest trees and plants grow there, so pliable in their stalks and leaves that at the least motion of the water they move, just as if they had life. All fishes, great and small, glide among twigs, just as here the birds do in the trees. In the deepest spot of all lies the Sea King's castle. The walls are of coral, and the tall pointed windows of the clearest amber. Mussel shells form the roof, and they open and shut according as the water flows. It looks lovely, for in each shell lie gleaming pearls, a single one of which would be a great ornament in a queen's diadem. Welcome in, Jay. How are you doing today? The Sea King below there had been a widower for many years, while his old mother kept house for him. I'm doing good, thank you. Sit back and relax with us. She was a clever woman, but proud of her rank. So she wore 12 oysters on her tail, while the other great people were only allowed to wear 6. Beyond this, she was deserving of great praise, especially because she was very fond of her granddaughters, the little sea princesses. There were 6 pretty children, but the youngest was the most beautiful of them all. Her skin was as clear and as fine as a rose leaf. Her eyes were as blue as the deepest sea, but, like all the rest, she had no feet, for her body ended in a fish tail. Good night, Samsonite. Sleep well. Thank you for stopping by. Can't relate. Oh. also wish to be a mermaid. All day long, they could play in the castle, down in the halls, where living flowers grew out of the walls. The great amber windows were opened, and then the fishes swam into them, just as the swallows fly to us when we open our windows. But the fishes swam straight up to the princesses, ate out of their hands, and let themselves be stroked. Oh, that's so cool, Zena. Outside the castle was a great garden with bright red and dark blue flowers. The fruit glowed like gold, and the flowers like flames of fire. And they continually kept moving their stalks and leaves. The earth itself was the finest sand, but blue as the flame of brimstone. A peculiar blue radiance lay upon everything down there. One would have thought oneself high in the air, with a canopy of heaven above them, and all around, rather than at the bottom of the deep blue sea. During a calm, the sun could be seen. It appeared like a purple flower from which all light streamed out. Each of the little princesses had her own little garden, where she might dig and plant at her good pleasure. One gave her flower bed the form of a whale. Another thought it was better to make hers like a little mermaid. But the youngest made hers quite round, like the sun, and had only flowers which gleamed red as the sun itself. Coffee, thank you for the stretch. How are you doing today, Coffee? Ooh. Oh, I needed that. You came in time. We're reading the original Little Mermaid. Making random stuff, like music. I am, thank you. Yeah? Funk for the funsies? Getting funky? Whoa. I hope you have fun. Thank you for the follow, Sassy-jin. Welcome in. Ah, welcome, Shun. Good job today. I hope work went alright. Welcome, welcome. We are reading the story of the Little Mermaid. She was a strange child, quiet and thoughtful, and when the other sisters made a display of the beautiful things they had received out of the wrecked ships, she would have nothing beyond the red flowers which resembled the sun, except a pretty marble statue. I'm glad to hear, Shun. This was a figure of a charming boy, hewn out of white clear stone, which had sunk down to the bottom of the sea from a wreck. She planted a pink weeping willow beside this statue, and the tree grew famously and hung its fresh branches over the statue towards the blue sandy ground. The shadow showed violet and moved like the branches themselves. It seemed as if the ends of the branches and the roots were playing together and wished to kiss each other. There was no greater pleasure for her than to hear of the world of men above them. The old grandmother had to tell all she knew of ships and towns, of men and animals. It seemed particularly beautiful to her that up on the earth the flowers shed fragrance, for they had none down at the bottom of the sea, and that the trees were green, and that the fishes which one saw there among the trees could sing so loud and clear that it was a pleasure to hear them. Thank you for the head pat. Hello, Duvet. How are you doing? Jay, thank you so much for 500 bits. Thank you, I appreciate it. Where was I? Here, okay. What grandmother called fishes were the little birds. Otherwise, they would not have understood her, for they had never seen a bird. It really be like that harmony when you get your model for the first time. It's like, whoa, I can stare at you all day. And thank you again, Jay. When you have completed your 15th year, said the grandmother, you shall have leave to rise up out of the sea. Yes, we are. To sit on the rocks in the moonlight and to see the great ships sailing by. Then you will see forests and towns. In the next year, one of the sisters was 15 years of age, but each of the others was 1 year younger than the next, so that the youngest had to wait full 5 years before she could come up from the bottom of the sea and find out how our world looked. But one promised to tell the others what she had seen and what she had thought the most beautiful on the first day of her visit. For their grandmother could not tell them enough. There was so much about which they wanted information. No one was more anxious about these things than the youngest. Just that one who had the longest time to wait and who was always quiet and thoughtful. Many a night she stood by the open window and looked up through the dark blue water at the fishes splashing with their fins and tails. Moon and stars she could see. They certainly shone quite faintly, but through the water they looked much larger than they appear in our eyes. When something like a black cloud passed among them, she knew that it was either a whale swimming over her head or a ship with many people. They certainly did not think that a pretty little sea maid was standing down below, stretching up her white hands towards the keel of their ship. Now, the eldest princess was 15 years old and might mount up to the surface of the sea. When she came back, she had hundreds of things to tell. But the finest thing she said was to lie in the moonshine on the sandbank in the quiet sea and to look at the neighboring coast, with a large town where the lights twinkled like 100 stars, and to hear the music and the noise and clamour of carriages and men, to see the many church steeples and to hear the sounds of the bells. Just because she could not get up to these, she longed for them more than anything. Oh, how the youngest sister listened! And afterwards, when she stood at the open window and looked up the dark blue water, she thought of the great city with all its bustle and noise. And then she thought she could hear the church bells ringing, even down to the depths where she was. In the following year, the second sister received permission to mount upward through the water and to swim whither she pleased. She rose up just as the sun was setting, and this spectacle, she said, was the most beautiful. The whole sky looked gold, she said, and as to the clouds, she could not properly describe their beauty. They sailed away over her head, purple and violet-colored, but far quicker than the clouds. There was a flight of wild swans, like a long white veil, over the water towards where the sun stood. She swam towards them, but the sun sank, and the roseate hue on the sea and in the clouds faded. In the following year, the next sister went up. She was the boldest of them all, and therefore she swam up a broad stream that poured its waters into the sea. She saw glorious green hills clothed with vines. Palaces and castles peeped forth from amid splendid woods. She heard how all the birds sang, and the sun shone so warm that she was often obliged to dive under the water to cool her glowing face. In a little bay, she found a whole swarm of little mortals. They were quite naked and splashed about in the water. She wanted to play with them, but they fled in a fright, and a little black animal came. It was a dog, but she had never seen a dog, and it barked at her so terribly that she became quite frightened and made out to the open sea. But she could never forget the glorious woods, the green hills, and the pretty children who could swim in the water though they had not fish tails. The fourth sister was not so bold. She remained out in the midst of the wild sea, and declared that just there it was most beautiful. One could see for many miles around, and the sky above looked like a bell of glass. She had seen ships, but only in the far distance. They looked like seagulls, and the funny dolphins had thrown somersaults, and the great whales spouted out from their nostrils, so that it looked like hundreds of fountains all around. Now came the turn of the fifth sister. Her birthday came in the winter, so she saw what the others had not seen the first time. The sea looked quite green, and great icebergs were floating about. Each one appeared like a pearl, she said, and yet was much taller than the church steeples built by men. They showed themselves in the strangest forms, and shone like diamonds. She had seated herself upon one of the greatest of all, and let the wind play with her long hair. And all the sailing ships tacked about in great alarm to go beyond where she sat, but towards evening the sky became covered with clouds. It thundered and lightened, and the black waves lifted the great ice blocks high up and let them glow in the red glare. On all the ships the sails were reefed, and there was fear and anguish. But she sat quietly upon her floating iceberg and saw the forked blue flashes dart into the sea. Each of the sisters, as she came up for the first time to the surface of the water, was delighted with the new and beautiful sights she saw. But as they now had permission, as grown-up girls, to go whenever they liked, it became indifferent to them. Good night, Bob. Sleep well. Thank you for hanging out. They wished themselves back again, and after a month had elapsed they said it was best of all down below, for there one felt so comfortably at home. Many an evening hour, the 5 sisters took one another by the arms and rose up in a row over the water. They had splendid voices, more charming than any mortal could have, and when a storm was approaching, so that they might expect the ships would go down, they swam on before the ships and sang lovely songs which told how beautiful it was at the bottom of the sea, and exhorted the sailors not to be afraid to come down. Pokor, thank you so much for the follow. Welcome in. Please get comfy. They swam on before the ships. Oh wait, I said that already. And exhorted the sailors not to be afraid to come down. But these could not understand the words, and thought it was the storm sighing. And they did not see the splendors below, for if the ships sank, they were drowned, and came as corpses to the Sea King's palace. Thank you for the redeem, Bob. Mwah. Mwah. Sleep well. When the sisters thus rose up, arm in arm, in the evening time, through the water, the little sister stood all alone, looking after them, and she felt as if she must weep. But the sea maid has no tears. For this reason, she suffers far more acutely. Oh, if only I were 15 years old, said she. I know I shall love the world up there very much, and the people who live and dwell there. And so the years would pass, and at last she really was 15 years old. Now you see you are grown up, said the grandmother, the old dowager. Come, let me adorn you like your sisters. And she put a wreath of white lilies in the little maid's hair, but each petal in the flower was half a pearl. And the old lady let 8 great oysters attach themselves to the princess's tail, in token of her high rank. But that hurts so, said the little sea maid. Yes, one must suffer something for the sake of rank, replied the old lady. Oh, how glad she would have been to shake off all the tokens of rank and lay aside the heavy wreath. Her red flowers in the garden suited her better, but she could not help it. Farewell, she said, and then she rose, light and clear as a water bubble, up through the sea. The sun had just set, when she lifted her head above the sea. But all the clouds still shone like roses in gold, and in the pale red sky the evening star gleamed bright and beautiful. The air was mild and fresh, and the sea was quite calm. There lay a great ship with 3 masts. One single sail only was set, for not a breeze stirred, and around in the shrouds and on the yards sat the sailors. There was music and singing, and as the evening closed in, hundreds of colored lanterns were lighted up and looked as if the flags of every nation were waving in the air. The little sea maid swam straight to the cabin window, and each time the sea lifted her up, she could look through the panes, which were clear as crystal, and see many people standing within, dressed in their best. Thank you so much for the follow, Centicrip. Welcome in. Please get comfy. But the handsomest of all was the young prince with the great black eyes. He was certainly not much more than 16 years old. It was his birthday, and that was the cause of all this festivity. The sailors were dancing upon deck, and when the young prince came out, more than 100 rockets rose into the air. They shone like day, so that the little sea maid was quite startled and dived under the water. But soon she put her head out again, and then it seemed just as if all the stars of heaven were falling down upon her. She had never seen such fireworks. Great suns whirled around, glorious fiery fishes flew up into the blue air, and everything was mirrored in the clear blue sky. The ship itself was so brightly lit up that every separate rope could be seen, and the people therefore appeared the more plainly. Oh, how handsome the young prince was! And he pressed the people's hands and smiled while the music rang into the glorious night. It became late, but the little sea maid could not turn her eyes from the ship and from the beautiful prince. The colored lanterns were extinguished, rockets ceased to fly into the air, and no more cannons were fired. But there was a murmuring and a buzzing deep down in the sea, and she sat on the water, swaying up and down so that she could look into the cabin. But as the ship got more way, one sail after another was spread, and now the waves rose higher. Great clouds came up, and in the distance there was lightning. Oh my gosh. I apologize, chat. I'm going to send a strongly worded text message. No, those are the goblins I call my siblings. Oh, it was going to be fearful weather, and therefore the sailors furled the sails. The great ship flew in swift career over the wild sea. The waters rose up like great black mountains which wanted to roll over the masts. But like a swan, the ship dived into the valleys between these high waves and then let itself be lifted on high again. Thank you so much for the follow. Sup, how you doing? 'Cause I don't know. I hope you're doing well. Yes, goblins. Thank you for the hydrate. Okay. To the little sea maid, this seemed merry sport, but to the sailors it appeared very differently. The ship groaned and creaked. The thick planks were bent by the heavy blows. The sea broke into the ship. The mainmast snapped in two like a thin reed, and the ship lay over on her side while the water rushed into the hold. Now the little sea maid saw that the people were in peril. She herself was obliged to take care to avoid the beams and fragments of the ship which were floating about on the waters. One moment it was so pitch dark that not a single object could be descried, but when it lightened, it became so bright that she could distinguish everyone on board. Everyone was doing the best he could for himself. She looked particularly for the young prince. When the ship parted, she saw him sink into the sea. But then she remembered that people could not live in the water, and that when he got down to her father's palace, he would certainly be dead. No, he must not die. So she swam about among the beams and planks that strewed the surface, quite forgetting that one of them might have crushed her. Diving down deep under the water, she again rose high among the waves, and in this way she came at last to the prince, who could scarcely swim longer in that stormy sea. His arms and legs began to fail him. His beautiful eyes closed, and he would have died had the little sea maid not come. She held his head up over the water, and then allowed the waves to carry her and him whither they listed. When the morning came, the storm had passed by. Of the ship, not a fragment was to be seen. The sun came up red and shining out of the water. It was as if its beams brought back the hue of life to the cheeks of the prince, but his eyes remained closed. The sea maid kissed his high, fair forehead and put back his wet hair, and he seemed to her to be like the marble statue in her little garden. She kissed him again and hoped that he might live. Now she saw in front of her the dry land, high blue mountains on whose summits the white snow gleamed as if swans were lying there. Down on the coast were glorious green forests, and a building, she could not tell whether it was a church or a convent, stood there. In its garden grew orange and citron trees, and high palms waved in front of the deep gate. The sea formed a little bay there. It was quite calm, but very deep. Straight towards the rock where the fine white sand had been cast up, she swam with the handsome prince and laid him upon the sand, taking special care that his head was raised in the warm sunshine. Now all the bells rang in the great white building, and many young girls came walking through the garden. Then the little sea maid swam farther out between some high stones that stood up out of the water, laid some sea foam upon her hair and neck so that no one could see her little face, and then she watched to see who would come to the poor prince. In a short time, a young girl went that way. She seemed to be much startled, but only for a moment. Then she brought more people, and the sea maid perceived that the prince came back to life and that he smiled at all around him. And she felt very sorrowful. And when he was taken away into the great building, she dived mournfully under the water and returned to her father's palace. While he had smiled at all around him, he did not cast a smile at her. He did not know that she had saved him. She had always been gentle and melancholy, but now she became much more so. Her sisters asked her what she had seen the first time she rose up to the surface, but she would tell them nothing. Many an evening and many a morning she went up to the palace where she had left the prince. She saw how the fruits of the gardens grew ripe and were gathered. She saw how the snow melted on the high mountain, but she did not see the prince, and so she always returned home more sorrowful still. Then her only comfort was to sit in her little garden and to wind her arms round the beautiful marble statue that resembled the prince. But she did not tend her flowers. They grew as if in a wilderness over the paths, and trailed their long leaves and stalks up into the branches of the trees, so that it became quite dark up there. At last, she could endure it no longer, and told all to one of her sisters, and then the others heard of it too. But nobody knew of it beyond these and a few other sea maids, who told their secret to the same intimate friends. One of these knew who the prince was too. She too had seen the festival on board the ship. She announced when he came and where his kingdom lay. This girl is obsessed. Yeah, a little bit. Come, little sister, said the other princesses, and linking their arms together, they rose up in a long row out of the sea at the place where they knew the prince's palace stood. This palace was built of a kind of bright yellow stone, in great marble staircases, one of which led directly down into the sea. Over the roof rose splendid gilt cupolas, and between the pillars which surrounded the whole dwelling stood marble statues which looked as if they were alive. Through the clear glass in the high windows, one looked into glorious halls, where costly silk hangings and tapestries were hung up, and all the walls were decked with splendid pictures, so that it was a perfect delight to see them. In the midst of the greatest of these halls, a great fountain plashed. Its jets shot high up towards the glass dome in the ceiling, through which the sun shone down upon the water and upon the lovely plants growing in the great basin. Now she knew where he lived, and many an evening and many a night she spent there on the water. Water Ghost 21, thank you for the follow. Welcome in. Please get comfy. She swam far closer to the land than that any of the others would have dared to venture. Indeed, she went quite up the narrow channel under the splendid marble balcony. Yanteriker, which threw a broad shadow upon the water. Here she sat and watched the young prince, who thought himself quite alone in the bright moonlight. It's a bit stalkerish, just a little bit. Many an evening she saw him sailing amid the sounds of music in his costly boat with the waving flags. She peeped up through the green reeds, and when the wind caught her silver-white veil, and anyone saw it, they thought it was a white swan spreading out its wings. Toupee. Many a night, when the fishermen were on the sea with their torches, she heard much good told of the young prince, and she rejoiced that she had saved his life when he was driven about half dead on the wild billows. She thought how quietly his head had reclined on her bosom, and how heartily she had kissed him, without consent, but he knew nothing of it, and could not even dream of her. More and more she began to love mankind, and more she wished to be able to wander out about among those whose world seemed far larger than her own. For they could fly over the sea in ships, mount up the high hills far above the clouds, and the land they possessed stretched out in woods and fields farther than her eyes could reach. There was much she wished to know, but her sisters could not answer all her questions. Therefore, she applied to the old grandmother. And the old lady knew the upper world, which she rightly called the countries above the sea, very well. She is wet in the sea, wetter on land. No. If people are not drowned, asked the little sea maid, can they live forever? Do they not die as we die down here in the sea? Punk. Yes, replied the old lady. They too must die, and their life is even shorter than ours. We can live to be 300 years old, but when we cease to exist, we are turned into foam on the surface of the water, and have not even a grave down here among those we love. We have not an immortal soul. We receive another life. We are like the green seaweed, which when once cut through can never bloom again. Men, on the contrary, have a soul which lives forever, which he lives on after the body has become dust. It mounts up through the clear air, all the way up to the shining stars. As we rise up out of the waters and behold the lands of earth, so they too rise up to unknown glorious places which we can never see. Why did we not receive an immortal soul? Asked the little sea maid. I would gladly give all the hundreds of years I have to live to be a human being only for one day, and to have a hope of partaking the heavenly kingdom. You must not think of that, replied the old lady. We feel ourselves far more happy and far better than mankind yonder. Then I'm to die, and to float as foam upon the sea, not hearing the music of the waves, nor seeing the pretty flowers and the red sun? Can I not do anything to win an immortal soul? No, answered the grandmother. Only if a man were to love you so that you should be more to him than father or mother, if he should cling to you with his every thought and with all his love, and let the priest lay his right hand in yours with a promise of faithfulness here and in all eternity, then his soul would be imparted to your body, and you would receive a share of the happiness of mankind. He would give a soul to you, yet retain his own. But that can never come to pass. The Hollow, thank you for the follow. Welcome in. I hope you're doing well. Get comfy. What is considered beautiful here in the sea, the fishtail, they would consider ugly on the earth. They don't understand it. Their one must have two clumsy supports, which they call legs, to be called beautiful. Then the little sea maid sighed and looked mournfully upon her fishtail. Let us be glad, said the old lady. Let us dance and leap in the 300 years we have to live. That is certainly long enough. After that we can rest ourselves all the better. This evening we shall have a court hall. Thank you for the follow, Ironila. Welcome in. It was a splendid sight, such as is never seen on earth. The walls and ceiling of the great dancing saloon were of thick but transparent glass. Several hundreds of huge shells, pink and grass green, stood on each side in rows, filled with a blue fire which lit up the whole hall and shone through the walls, so that the sea without was quite lit up. One could see all the innumerable fishes, great and small, swimming towards the glass walls. Of some the scales gleamed with purple, while in others they shone like silver and gold. Through the midst of the hall flowed a broad stream, and on this the seamen and sea women danced to their own charming songs. Waka waka. Such beautiful voices the people of the earth have not. The little sea maid sang the most sweetly of all, and the whole court applauded her, and for a moment she felt happy in her heart, for she knew she had the loveliest voice of all in the sea or on earth. I don't have sound alerts on because it's ASMR. But waka waka. There you go. Almost 6 months. Wow. That's been so fast. I will be the sound alert. Yes, it's my time. Snack Sparrow, thank you for the follow. Welcome in. How are you doing? Okay. But soon. Oh. Pop Candy Chi, thank you so much for the follow. Welcome in. I hope you're doing well. Arr. Hello, Snack Sparrow. I'm doing fantastic, thank you. Welcome in. Please get comfy. I'm glad to hear you're doing well. Welcome to the stream. We are reading Fairy Tales by Hans Christian Andersen. And right now we're reading the story of the Little Mermaid. Oh, I see, Pop Candy. Well, please sit back and relax. I am doing well, thank you. I hope you're able to get some rest soon. We are reading the story of the Little Mermaid, the original story. So it's a little bit darker than what Disney has, but it's a good story all the same. Oh, frog. Well, you can always leave it where it is now, and then if you feel like you need to add on, then you can do that later. Okay, so we have just said that the Little Mermaid was happy because she realized she had the loveliest voice in all of the sea or on the earth. Every service wasn't it meant as a love letter to the man he was in love with? Hans Christian Andersen? I did not know that. Really? Can someone look that up? That's actually so fascinating. I had no idea. But yes, if you've just joined us, please sit back and relax. And thank you for popping in. But soon, she thought again of the world above her. She could not forget the charming prince, or her sorrow at not having an immortal soul like his. But the other person didn't feel the same and didn't swing that way. Oh my gosh. The more you know. I had no idea. Wow. This makes the story all the more sad. Oh. Yeah. Oh. Oh man, I think I'm going to cry reading the end of this one. Ah, well. When we get there, we'll get there. Thank you for sharing that. Therefore, she crept out of her father's palace, and while everything within was joy and gladness, she sat melancholy in her little garden. Oh, I see. I see, Pop Candy. Then she heard the bugle horn sounding through the waters and thought, "Now he is certainly sailing above. He whom I love more than father or mother, he on whom my wishes hang, and in whose hand I should like to lay my life's happiness. I will dare everything to win him and an immortal soul. While my sisters dance yonder in my father's palace, I will go to the sea witch, of whom I have always been so much afraid. Perhaps she can counsel and help me." Now the little sea maid went out of her garden to the foaming whirlpools behind which the sorceress dwelt. She had never traveled that way before. No flowers grew here, no sea grass, only the bare grey sand stretched out towards the whirlpools. It was here where the water rushed round like a roaring mill and tore down everything it seized into the deep. Through the midst of these rushing whirlpools, she was obliged to pass to get into the domain of the witch, and for a long way there was no other road except one which led over warm, bubbling mud. This the witch called her peat moss. Behind it lay her house in the midst of a singular forest in which all the trees and bushes were polyps, half animals, half plants. They looked like 100-headed snakes growing up out of the earth, and all the branches were long, slimy arms with fingers like supple snakes, and they moved joint by joint from the root to the farthest point. All that they could seize on in the water that held fast and never again let it go. The little sea maid stopped in front of them, quite frightened. Her heart beat with fear, and she was nearly turning back, but then she thought of the prince and the human soul, and her courage came back again. She bound her long, flying hair closely around her head so that the polyps might not seize it. She put her hands together on her breast and then shot forward as the fish shoots through the water among the ugly polyps which stretched out the supple arms and fingers at her. She saw that each of them held something in it, something it had seized with hundreds of little arms. Like strong iron bands, each of them clung to these things with great greed. Hello, Thick, welcome back. People who had perished at sea and had sunk deep down and looked forth as white skeletons from among the polyps' arms, ship rudders and chests they also held fast, and skeletons of land animals, and a little mermaid whom they had caught and strangled. And this seemed the most terrible of all to our little princess. Now she came to a great marshy place in the wood, where fat water snakes rolled about, showing their ugly cream-colored bodies. In the midst of this marsh was a house built of white bones of shipwrecked men. There sat the sea witch, feeding a toad out of her mouth, just as a person might feed a little canary bird with sugar. She called the ugly-fought water snakes her little chickens and allowed them to crawl upwards and all about her. "I know what you want," said the sea witch. "It is stupid of you, but you shall have your way, for it will bring you grief, my pretty princess. You want to get rid of your fishtail and to have two supports instead of it, like those the people of the earth walk with, so that the young prince may fall in love with you, and you may get him and an immortal soul." And with this, the witch laughed loudly and disagreeably, so that the toad and the water snakes trembled down to the ground, where they crawled about. "You come just in time," said the witch. "After tomorrow at sunrise, I could not help you until another year had gone by. I will prepare a draught for you, with which you must swim to the land tomorrow before the sun rises, and seat yourself there and drink it. Then your tail will part into two and shrink in and become what the people of the earth call beautiful legs. But it will hurt you. It will seem as if you were cut with a sharp sword." "Oh, Chris, thank you so much. That's so sweet. Please stay as long as you like. It's a pleasure having you here, and I'm happy to be company for the evening." "Thank you so much. You're most welcome here. Anytime." "All who see you will declare you to be the prettiest human being they ever beheld. You will keep your graceful walk. No dancer will be able to move so lightly as you, but every step you take will be as if you trod upon sharp knives, and as if your blood must flow. If you will bear all this, I can help you." "Yes," said the little sea maid, with a trembling voice, and she thought of the prince and the immortal soul. "Hello, Tawa. Welcome in. How are you, baby?" "But remember," said the witch, "when you have once received a human form, you can never be a sea maid again. You can never return through the water to your sisters or to your father's palace, and if you do not win the prince's love, so that he forgets father and mother for your sake, and is attached to you heart and soul, and tells the priest to draw in your hands, you will not receive an immortal soul. On the first morning after he has married another, your heart will break, and you will become foam on the water." "Oh, yes. Relax, sleep. Sit back and relax. We do be vibing. Rest well, Toa." "I will do it," said the little sea maid, but she became pale as death. "Oh, that's so sweet. Congratulations, Toa. Oh, You've grown so much. I'm so proud of you. Congratulations, that's a huge achievement. Aww, I'm so happy for you, baby. Congratulations. That must have been super nice to get. Oh, it's so nice of them to do. Oh, I'm happy to have met you too, baby. Big love. But you must pay me too, said the witch, and it is not a trifle that I will ask. You have the finest voice of all here at the bottom of the water. With that, you think to enchant him. But this voice you must give to me. The best thing you possess I will have for my costly draught. I must give you my own blood in it, so that the draught may be sharp as a two-edged sword. But if you take away my voice, said the little sea maid, what will remain to me? Your beautiful form, said the witch, your graceful walk, and your eloquent eyes. With those you can take captive a human heart. Well, have you lost your courage? Put out your little tongue, and then I will cut it off for my payment, and then you shall have the strong draught. Let it be so, said the little sea maid. And the witch put on her pot to brew the draught. Cleanliness is a good thing, said she, and she cleaned out the pot with the snakes, which she tied up in a big knot. Then she scratched herself and let her black blood drop into it. Thank you for the hydrate, Toa. Wow. Water is so good. The steam rose up in the strangest forms, enough to frighten the beholder. Oh, thank you. Every moment the witch threw something else into the pot, and when it boiled thoroughly, there was a sound like the weeping of a crocodile. At last, the draught was ready. It looked like the purest water. There you have it, said the witch, and she cut off the little sea maid's tongue, so that now she was dumb and could neither sing nor speak. If the polyps should lay hold of you when you are returning through my forest, said the witch, just cast a single drop of this liquor upon them, and their arms and fingers will fly into 1,000 pieces. But the little sea maid had no need to do this. The polyps drew back in terror when they saw the shining liquid that gleamed in her hand as if it were a twinkling star. In this way she soon passed through the forest with the moss and the rushing whirlpools. Harmony, thank you so much for the tier 1 sub to Toa. Thank you, thank you. She could see her father's palace. The torches were extinguished in the great dancing hall, and they were certainly sleeping within. But she did not dare to go to them, now that she was dumb and was about to quit them forever. She felt as if her heart would burst with sorrow. She crept up into the garden, took a flower from each of his sister's flower beds, blew 1,000 kisses towards the palace, and rose up to the dark blue sea. The sun had not yet risen when she beheld the prince's castle and mounted the splendid marble staircase. The moon shone beautifully clear. Finally, the little sea maid drank the burning sharp draught, and it seemed as if a two-edged sword went straight through her delicate body. She fell down in a swoon and lay as if she were dead. Late Nighter, thank you so much for the follow. Welcome in. How are you doing? Please get comfy with us. When the sun shone out over the sea, she awoke and felt a sharp pain. But just before her stood the handsome young prince. He fixed his coal-black eyes upon her so that she cast down her own, and then she perceived that her fishtail was gone, and that she had the prettiest pair of white feet a little girl could have. The prince asked who she was and how she had come there, and she looked at him mildly, but very mournfully, with her dark blue eyes, for she could not speak. Then he took her by the hand and led her into the castle. Each step she took was, as the witch had told her, as if she had been treading on pointed needles and sharp knives, but she bore it gladly. At the prince's right hand she moved on, light as a soap bubble, and he, like all the rest, was astonished at her graceful swaying movements. She now received splendid clothes of silk and muslin. In the castle she was the most beautiful of all, but she was dumb and could neither sing nor speak. Lovely slaves dressed in silk and gold stepped forward and sang before the prince and his royal parents. One sang more charmingly than all the rest, and the prince smiled at her and clapped his hands. Then the little sea maid became sad. She knew that she herself had sung far more sweetly, and thought, "Oh, if only he could know that I have given away my voice forever to be with him." Now the slaves danced pretty waving dances to the loveliest music. Then the little sea maid lifted her beautiful white arms, stood on the tips of her toes, and glided, dancing over the floor as no one had yet danced. At each movement, her beauty became more and more apparent, and her eyes spoke more directly to the heart than the songs of the slaves. All were delighted, and especially the prince, although every time she touched the earth, it seemed as if she were treading upon sharp knives. The prince said she should always remain with him, and she received permission to sleep on a velvet cushion before his door. He had a page's dress made for her, that she might accompany him on horseback. They rode through the fragrant woods, where the green boughs swept their shoulders, and the little birds sang in the fresh leaves. She climbed with the prince up the high mountains, and although her delicate feet bled so that even the others could see it, she laughed at it herself and followed him until they saw the clouds sailing beneath them like a flock of birds traveling to distant lands. At home, in the prince's castle, when the others slept at night, she went out onto the broad marble steps. Amanda's show, thank you so much for the follow. Welcome in. I hope you're doing fantastic. Please get comfy with us. It cooled her burning feet to stand in the cold sea water, and then she thought of the dear ones in the deep. Once, in the night time, her sisters came arm in arm. Sadly, they sang as they floated above the water, and she beckoned to them, and they recognized her and told her how she had grieved them all. They visited her then every night, and once she saw in the distance her old grandmother, who had not been above the surface for many years, and the Sea King with his crown upon his head. They stretched out their hands towards her, but did not venture so near the land as her sisters. Day by day, the prince grew more fond of her. He loved her as one loves a dear, good child, but it never came into his head to make her his wife. And yet, wife she must become, or she would not receive an immortal soul, and would have become sea foam on his wedding morning. Do you not love me best of all? The eyes of the little sea maid seemed to say, when he took her into his arms and kissed her fair forehead. Yes, you are the dearest to me, said the prince, for you have the best heart of them all. You are the most devoted to me, and are like a young girl whom I saw once, but whom I certainly shall not find again. I was on board a ship which was wrecked. The waves threw me ashore near a holy temple where several young girls performed the service. The youngest of them found me by the shore and saved my life. I only saw her twice. She was the only one in the world I could love, but you chase her picture out of my mind. You are so like her. She belongs to the holy temple, and therefore my good fortune has sent you to me. We will never part. Ah, he does not know that I saved his life, thought the little sea maid. I carried him over the sea to the wood where the temple stands. I sat there under the foam and looked to see if anyone would come. I saw the beautiful girl whom he loves better than me, and the sea maid sighed deeply. She could not weep. The maiden belongs to the holy temple, he has said, and will never come out into the world. They will meet no more. I am with him and see him every day. I will cherish him, love him, give up my life for him. But now, they said that the prince was to marry, and that the beautiful daughter of a neighboring king was to be his wife. And that was why such a beautiful ship was being prepared. The story was, the prince traveled to visit the land of the neighboring king, but it was done that he might see the king's daughter. A great company was to go with him. The little sea maid shook her head and smiled. She knew the prince's thoughts far better than any of the others. I must travel, he said to her. I must see the beautiful princess my parents desire it. They do not wish to compel me to bring her home as my bride. I cannot love her. She is not like the beautiful maiden in the temple whom you resemble. Mans is like so obsessed. Can you imagine someone saying that to you? Ick. She is not like the beautiful maiden in the temple whom you resemble. If I were to choose a bride, I would rather choose you, my dear dumb foundling with the speaking eyes. And he kissed her red lips and played with her long hair, so that she dreamed of happiness and of an immortal soul. You are not afraid of the sea, my child, said he, when they stood on the superb ship which was to carry him to the country of the neighboring king. And he told her of storm and calm, of strange fishes in the deep, and of what the divers had seen there. And she smiled at his tales, for she knew better than anyone what there was at the bottom of the sea. In the moonlight night, when all were asleep, except the steersman who stood by the helm, she sat on the side of the ship, gazing down through the clear water. She fancied she saw her father's palace. High on the battlements stood her old grandmother, with a silver crown on her head, and looking through the rushing tide up to the vessel's lead, a keel. Then her sisters came forth over the water, and looked mournfully at her, and wrung their white hands. She beckoned to them, smiled, and wished to tell them that she was well and happy. But the cabin boy approached her, and his sisters dived down, so that he thought the white objects he had seen were foam on the surface of the water. The next morning, the ship sailed into the harbor of the neighboring king's splendid city. All the church bells sounded, and from the high towers the trumpets were blown. While the soldiers stood there with flying colors and flashing bayonets, there was much merriment and rejoicing, and all were welcome. Each day brought some festivity with it. Balls and entertainments followed one another, but the princess was not yet there. People said she was being educated in the holy temple far away, where she was learning every royal virtue. Uh-oh. At last she arrived. The little sea maid was anxious to see the beauty of the princess, and was obliged to acknowledge it. A more lovely apparition she had never beheld. The princess's skin was pure and clear, and behind the long dark eyelashes there smiled a pair of faithful dark blue eyes. You are the lady who saved me when I lay like a corpse upon the shore, said the prince, and he folded his blushing bride to his heart. Oh, I am too happy, he cried to the little sea maid. The best hope I could have is fulfilled. You will rejoice at my happiness, for you are the most devoted to me of them all. Oh. And the little sea maid kissed his hand, and it seemed already to her as if her heart was broken. For his wedding morning was to bring death to her and change her into foam on the sea. All the church bells were ringing, and heralds rode out about the streets announcing the betrothal. On every altar, fragrant oil was burning in gorgeous lamps of silver. The priests swung the censers, and bride and bridegroom laid hand in hand and received the bishop's blessing. The little sea maid was dressed in cloth of gold and held up the bride's train, but her ears heard nothing of the festive music. Her eye marked not the holy ceremony. She thought of the night of her death and of all that she had lost in this world. Welcome back, Vic. On the same evening, the bride and bridegroom went on board the ship. The cannon roared, all the flags waved. In the midst of the ship, a costly tent of gold and purple with the most beautiful cushions had been set up, and there the married pair were to sleep in the cool, still air. The sails swelled in the sea and in the wind, and the ship glided smoothly and lightly over the clear water. When it grew dark, colored lamps were lighted, and the sailors danced merry dances on deck. The little sea maid thought of the first time when she had risen up out of the sea and beheld a similar scene of splendor and joy, and she joined in the whirling dance and flitted on as the swallow flits away when he is pursued, and all shouted and admired her, for she had danced so prettily. Her delicate feet were cut as if with knives, but she did not feel it, for her heart was wounded far more painfully. She knew this was the last evening on which she should see him for whom she had left her friends and her home, and had given up her beautiful voice, and had suffered unheard of pains every day while he was utterly unconscious of it all. Partyboy25, thank you so much for the follow. Welcome in. I hope you're having a fantastic day. Please get comfy. It was the last evening she should breathe the same air as him, and behold the starry sky and the deep sea. An everlasting night without thought or dream awaited her, for she had no soul and could win none. And everything was merriment and gladness on the ship till past midnight, and she laughed and danced with thoughts of her death in her heart. The prince kissed his beautiful bride, and she played with his raven hair, and hand in hand they went to rest in the splendid tent. It became quiet on the ship. Only the helmsman stood by the helm, and the little sea maid leaned her white arms upon the bulwark and gazed out towards the east for the morning dawn. For the first ray, she knew, would kill her. Then she saw her sisters rising out of the flood. They were pale, like herself. Their long, beautiful hair no longer waved in the wind. It had been cut off. We have given our hair to the witch, that she might bring you help, so that you may not die tonight. She has given us a knife. Here it is. Look. How sharp. Before the sun rises, you must thrust it into the heart of the prince, and when the warm blood falls upon your feet, they will grow together again into a fish tail, and you will become a sea maid again, and come back to us, and live your 300 years before you become dead salt sea foam. Make haste, or he or you must die before the sun rises. Our old grandmother mourns so that her white hair has fallen off, as ours did under the witch's scissors. Kill the prince and come back. Make haste. Do you see that red streak in the sky? In a few minutes the sun will rise and you must die. And they gave a very mournful sigh and vanished beneath the waves. Hello, Hoya! Good evening! Welcome in. The little sea maid drew back the purple curtain from the tent and saw the beautiful bride lying with her head on the prince's breast. Hello, hello, welcome. And she bent down and kissed his brow and gazed up to the sky where the morning red was gleaming brighter and brighter. Then she looked at the sharp knife and again fixed her eyes upon the prince, who in his sleep murmured his bride's name. She alone was in his thoughts, and the knife trembled in the sea maid's hands. But then she flung it far away into the waves. They gleamed red where it fell, and it seemed as if drops of blood spurted up out of the water. Once more she looked with half-extinguished eyes upon the prince. Then she threw herself from the ship into the sea and felt her frame dissolving into foam. Now the sun rose up out of the sea. The rays fell mild and warm upon the cold sea foam, and the little sea maid felt nothing of death. She saw the bright sun, and over her head sailed hundreds of glorious ethereal beings. She could see them through the white sails of the ship and the red clouds of the sky. Their speech was melody, but out of such a spiritual kind that no human ear could hear it, just as no earthly eye could see them. Without wings, they floated through the air. The little sea maid found that she had a frame like these, and was rising more and more out of the foam. "Where am I going?" she asked, and her voice sounded like that of the other beings, so spiritual that no earthly music could be compared to it. "To the daughters of the air," replied the others. "A sea maid has no immortal soul, and can never gain one except she win the love of another, of a mortal. Her eternal existence depends upon the power of another. The daughters of the air have likewise no immortal soul, but they can make themselves one through good deeds. We fly to the hot countries where the close pestilent air kills men, and there we bring coolness. We disperse the fragrance of the flowers to the air and spread refreshment and health. After we have striven for 300 years to accomplish all the good we can bring about, we receive an immortal soul and can take part in the eternal happiness of men. Party Boy 25, thank you so much for the redeem. Who's a good boy? You're a good boy, Party Boy. You poor little sea maid have striven with your whole heart after the goal we pursue. You have suffered and endured. You have by good works raised yourself to the world of spirits and can gain an immortal soul after 300 years. A Vulcan concept, thank you so much for the follow. Welcome in. Please make yourself comfy. And the little sea maid lifted her bright arms towards God's Son, and for the first time she felt tears. On the ship there was again life and noise. She saw the prince and his bride searching for her. Then they looked mournfully at the pearly foam, as if they knew that she had thrown herself into the waves. Invisible, she kissed the forehead of the bride, smiled to the prince, and mounted with the other children of the air on the rosy cloud which floated through the ether. After 300 years, we shall thus float into paradise. And we may even get there sooner, whispered one. Invisibly, we float into the houses of men where children are, and for every day on which we find a good child that brings joy to its parents and deserves their love, our time of probation is shortened. The child does not know when we fly through the room, and when we smile with joy at the child's conduct, a year is counted off from the 300. But when we see a naughty or wicked child, we shed tears of grief, and for every tear a day is added to a time of trial. And thus the little mermaid received her wish in the end, and was one day able to join in the eternal happiness of paradise. The end. Wow. The end. What a story. I hope you guys enjoyed that. Yeah. It's sad. It's a sad story, but the ending is happy. The ending is happy. Did you guys enjoy that? Paulus Jr., thank you so much for the follow. Welcome in. I always get very emotional listening to reading that story. Farming? Of course I'll enjoy it. Oh, Shad. Thank you. Oh, I'm glad, Raz. Josie the Tiger and the Fish? Is that a folk tale? in, welcome in. How are you, baby? I think even though we only read 2 stories, they were very long. We might call it a break there for today, but I'll happily sit and chat with you all a little bit longer. I'm good, thank you, Saren. How are you? How are you? Oh wait, you just said you're good. I hope you're doing well. Is it morning for you now? It's an anime, but in the movie, one of the characters writes a kid's story and reads it out loud. Oh, I see. Good morning. Good morning. You have not slept. Why? Why are you staying up? We are here to create a comfy, sleepy time for everyone. Did you make one? I'm gonna take a look after stream. Thank you, Vic. But yes, I think we'll leave it there for the stories tonight. I hope you guys are either asleep or you enjoyed that. Harmony. The first step to fixing a problem is recognizing it. Yeah, so keep that in mind. You're doing your best. My darlings, even though stream is coming to an end, I want to let you know, tomorrow we are having a New Year's party in my Discord. Stolen VR, thank you so much for the follow. Welcome in, please get comfy with us. Yes, tomorrow we are having a New Year's party in our Discord. Thank you, Shad. Yes, if you would like to join, please join in our Discord. We're a small but very, very welcoming community. Very, very lovely people. Very cozy, and we'll be playing Jackbox games, crab game, possibly things like Fall Guys. You'll be there? Yay! Yes, yes. It'll be not streamed, it'll just be in the Discord, so it's very chill, open to everyone. So, what is Crab Game? Crab Game is a parody of Squid Game, as in the TV show, the Korean TV show, and it is free on Steam. It's just like if you haven't watched Squid Game, it's basically a number of players go through different challenges until there's only one person left. What time? I believe, let me check my schedule. I believe I put it 8 o'clock. 8 o'clock Australian Eastern Standard Time. H-Town Joker, thank you so much for the follow. Welcome in. Please get comfy with us. Oh, thank you. I appreciate you saying that. Welcome, welcome. I hope you've been doing well. We start at 8 o'clock tomorrow. But we're probably gonna go pretty late. I'm not gonna lie. I'm gonna drink coffee tomorrow. I'll drink coffee and, you know, get the party started. Thank you. Appreciate it. Espresso? Yeah. I'm so grown up. Okay. I'll take it. Thank you, Joker. Well, I'll start with coffee just to, like, wake me up. And then we'll be drinking. So, expect chaos. That is such a cute emote. Oh my gosh. Chunk. I love it. Man, you don't have to drink too. You don't have to, but if you want to. You like the taste of a latte or a cappuccino? I think I'm more of a latte person. I think. But you're also sick? Yes, please be responsible. We're here to have a good time. Very good time tomorrow. We'll be celebrating New Year's and, bringing some fun, some good vibes to end the year. But yes, thank you so much, everyone, for joining me today. We have reached page 100 in this book out of, let me check. Oh my god. Page 100 out of 1183. That's how thick this book is. Crushing Penguin, thank you so much for the follow. Welcome in. How are you doing? I think, well, we'll definitely go through it slowly. Thick book? Yeah, it's a thick boy. We'll be reading for a while, yeah. And in the end, I believe that we'll be like interspersing it with the Greek mythology. Anyway, so it's like, here or there. It won't be continuously fairy tales. But I feel like this is the most like chill that we've been. So, looking forward to that. But for now, I am going to bid you all a good night. I am looking at the ASMR category to see who I can deliver you guys to. Because I don't want you to be spooked. I don't want everyone who's asleep to be woken up. But thank you so much for joining me today. Please give the next ASMR artist a lot of love. I don't follow them yet, so hopefully we can make a new friend, okay? So please be on your best behavior and bring the raid message with you, okay? I'm counting on you guys. They are reading A Feast for Crows by George R.R. Martin. It's one of the Game of Thrones books. So I hope you guys enjoy. Thank you so much again, everyone, for such a very calm and lovely stream. And I will see you all at the party tomorrow, okay? One last plug of the Discord. I will see you all next time, okay? Good night, good night. Sleep well, everyone, or have a wonderful day. Bye-bye.